Labour Environment spokeswoman Maryan Street visited Dunedin late last week for a focus on sustainability meeting. The event was billed as a public conversation on the environment and attracted about 20 people. Local Labour MP Clare Curran was there, and she joins us tonight with the details and to discuss other events affecting the South. Good evening.
Good evening.
Tell us a little bit about what was discussed at the meeting last week.
Well, Maryan Street was there, as you said, to have a public conversation, and there were lots of things discussed. Some of those were climate change and really how it's kind of dropped off the radar as being an important issue. In fact, the government has more or less admitted defeat on climate change and has dropped its expectations to 5% of emissions in the last week. We also heard from a number of people. We heard from a Dr. Janet Stevenson from the university who talked about our energy cultures, how we use energy, and we heard from some great young women from Generation Zero talking about public transport around Dunedin and cycling and full of energy, and it gives you great hope for the future, really.
What are the pressing environmental issues that Labour considers need addressing?
Well, I think there's a number of things. Climate change is still very much on the agenda. Our rivers, the state of our rivers, how we use energy, the price of energy, as well as ensuring that we have enough renewable energy and that we are putting the research into that.
And I understand there was also discussion about how an Environment Minister should operate. Tell us about that.
Yes, that was quite interesting. Maryan Street talked about having essentially a reference group around a minister, and I think that really applies to any minister who's not either officials or stakeholders with a vested interest. So I certainly think that it's quite relevant at the moment on the GCSB legislation, because what we're asking for is an independent group, and I think any minister could do with a group that doesn't have a direct vested interest or like a group of officials who are afraid of keeping their jobs.
The meeting also heard from a variety of environmental advocates. What was the general consensus?
Well, I think that we should keep talking, and that environment issues are very much on the top of the agenda and should remain up there. Ultimately, it's about how we live our lives, whether we can afford our power bills, but also how we use our power, as well as what kind of power we're creating. And I think trying to reduce our reliance on fossil fuels was certainly very high on the discussion as well.
What's likely to result from this meeting?
I think we'll keep having those conversations. I think I've already seen a spin-off. There's a group of young people out there doing a survey on how Dunedinites use public transport. So, you know, those sorts of things, so that we can just keep the environment issues on the agenda, especially going into next year.
And on a completely different note, the summit on the Southern economy was held last week. What are your thoughts on how that went?
Well, I think it was a good exercise. I'm, I suppose, determined that it's not going to be just talking, that there has to be practical actions. We need to create jobs in Dunedin, not just save them. There's no doubt that the Invermay job cuts are the thin end of the wedge, and I suppose these are really important jobs, and they're about the state of our local economy, but they're also about our academic quality and our status as a city of education, high education quality. So, but we've got to create jobs, and we've got to look at jobs for our young people as well. I was a bit concerned that I didn't feel that was talked about enough at the summit. I think what we need to see is what practical actions are going to come out of it. We've got to keep talking to each other, but we've also got to have a list of very practical actions that we're going to see put into practice.
Local Labour MP Clare Curran, thanks very much for your time.
Thank you.